What's up, everybody? It's Josh here and
Nathan Simmons.
And this is For New Eyes Only, a James Bond retrospective series where I have not seen any of the movies.
No, not a single damn one. Well, I mean, more or less. Not
More
a
or
single
less.
damn one of them.
Yeah, we mentioned this on our announcement episode. I have seen A View to a Kill, but don't remember what the plot is. I only know who's in it.
Sure.
And certain scenes that happen. So this is a series where we are going to go back in chronological order. We're going to watch all the Bond films. We're going to talk about them. Nathan is a big fan. Mm-hmm. I am a newbie, don't know anything about these movies. So therefore, that's the conversation. We're just going to talk about what my first time watches were like for these movies and go from there. And we're going to try and have a lot of fun along the way.
And boy, what a movie to watch for the first time in year of our Lord 2021. We're of course talking about 1962's Dr. No, which was directed by Terrence Young and stars Sean Connery as 007 himself.
Bond. James Bond.
Yes. Josh.
You know, it's weird right off the top. Connery hasn't quite developed into the Connery we know, you know, it's he's young, he's hot, and he doesn't have mush mouth yet. Just off the top, before we kind of get into everything, what are your first impressions of Dr. No?
Well, I do want to say on our announcement episode and what we're going to plan we're going to do at the end of each of these episodes is we're going to throw it over to me and I'm going to guess what the plot line of the movie is. So for anybody who didn't listen to that announcement episode, you
gave a valiant guess.
It was James Bond is unhappy with his appearance and he goes to a plastic surgeon named Dr. No to get his face tightened up, and the doctor just continues to tell him no. Hence the name Dr. No.
Yeah.
So,
and were you surprised that didn't happen in this film?
You know, there's doctors involved in this, but not really the ones that I was thinking about.
James Bond is in it.
James Bond is in it, but there are no facelifts involved.
No.
And this was interesting. I will say this was an interesting watch.
Yeah.
Just because it's the start of a series, you don't really know what to expect and how everything has a beginning, and usually the beginning is a little bit of a rough start, and then you kind of find your footing.
Sure.
Probably the exact way this podcast is going to go. But this one was strange because, you know, I'm only familiar with the tropes that are in other movies and like the spoofs of Bond and sort of what I've seen within the new Daniel Craig movies, because I have seen those. Those are the ones that I have seen and am fairly familiar with. But my biggest thing with watching those movies originally was, you know, these are great Bond movies. I like that they're modern, and therefore I don't have to deal with the old aspect of the older movies.
Yeah.
So, you know, we talked about this briefly on the announcement episode. I really didn't feel the need to go back and watch these movies, but, you know, being a lover of cinema and wanting to have my education in cinema, it was par for the course that I was going to end up watching these movies. And it just so happens that you are a big fan, and therefore a podcast was born. And it's funny, man, because older movies are hard for me.
Sure.
You know, we just talked about Fistful of Dollars on the main show here at VHS Files. I had never seen that one. I've never seen any of the Man with No Name trilogy movies.
Sure.
And it sparked a little bit of a controversy with Jason hates Westerns. You know, he grew up in Texas. He grew up with a family that kind of pushed those on him. So therefore,
I get it.
Watching a Western for him is like nails on a chalkboard. And going back and watching,
like, I hate spring break movies because I grew up in Panama City Beach. Like,
well, there's one quintessential spring break movie, Spring Breakers. Yep. I like that one, but yeah, I mean, watching Fistful of Dollars, like I kind of want to get that education. I want to know why Tarantino thinks these spaghetti westerns are so good, and so same thing here. And I kind of have to be able to look past the elements of, you know, early 60s filmmaking.
The limitations of budget and how pacing and filmmaking has changed, for sure.
And you know, the biggest thing that gets me with older movies, especially ones like this, is like wardrobe. And in the society we live in today, it's like,
and we do live in a society, as the Joker always says.
We do. You know, people don't dress up in suits all the time, and people aren't as snooty looking in these as they are in these movies. Yeah. So it's hard to put yourself in that sort of world.
That's a reason why on That's a Scary Movie, we pay a lot of attention to wardrobe, because especially when we're watching, you know, older flicks from like the 60s and 70s, we're just like, fuck, I want all of those shoulder pads. I want all of the little boot moments. Like there's some killer threads throughout the Bond series, and it all starts here. So before we kind of dive into the plot and you know, questions about all of that, I guess I should try to summarize the movie in 007 seconds or less.
Nathan will attempt to tell us the plot in 7 seconds or less at the beginning of every show.
At least the elevator pitch. So,
all right.
Are you going to time me?
I'm going to give you a countdown and we'll time you. Ready?
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Following the assassination of a member of MI6, James Bond discovers a sinister plot against NASA orchestrated by Dr. No.
Very good.
Hell yeah. Which, by the way, when I watched it as a kid, didn't realize that Dr. No's genius plan was, I'm going to make NASA look dumb. You know, like that's like his big plan. And I love something about a billionaire, like enigmatic, you know, super genius just being real petty.
Yeah. Well, that's something, and I think a lot of the things I've identified in this movie, I'm assuming are going to be tropes that continue throughout this entire series.
Sure.
But I was surprised that we don't see or meet Dr. No until 3/4 of the way through the movie.
And he's in 2 scenes.
Right. Yeah. And was surprisingly not very menacing to me.
I enjoy Joseph Wiseman's performance. I will agree that he's not particularly scary, but I think I like how arch he is. There's a very fun, his delivery, you know, the way he delivers his line is very much like this. And there's something I quite enjoy about, there's a bit where he says to Bond,
"Unfortunately, I misjudged you. You are just a stupid policeman."
And I was like, is he my favorite Bond villain? Because like, that line delivery is masterful.
Well, I want to get into just the initial viewing of this movie for me.
Yeah.
Number one, I put on the Blu-ray, and the Blu-ray menu screen has nude girls all over it.
CGI nude girls, weird, like it. Yeah, it's like you're entering like the hornier version of the Matrix.
Yeah, and
it's very strange.
Funny enough, I mean, don't get me wrong, Bond has a couple of lovemaking quarrels in this film, but
he sure does.
A lot less than what I was anticipating, honestly.
Yeah, and to the point where like one of them was added in from the book. Miss Taro is like not in the book at all, and it's very much, it's a weird cul-de-sac that the plot goes in to like get Bond to hook up with another lady.
Please.
Oh, forgive me. I thought I was invited up here to admire the view.
It's a very strange, but it does lead to my favorite scene in the movie. It's so funny you mentioned the Blu-ray, because I put the Blu-ray on. That was one of the first things my girlfriend said, was just like, why are there like DreamWorks animated nude women on the cover or on the menu screen?
I can understand silhouettes, but no, like these are like actual, like
that's the other thing that's gonna blow your mind. Watching these remastered, there are things you were not supposed to see when this was, you know, shot on film and you know, shown in theaters back in the 60s or on television, you know, in a tiny television. There's some very surprising things that got past the censors because no one was ever supposed to see them.
Right. I think I noticed an actual technical flaw in this movie watching it.
Yeah, those pop up too, for sure. Yeah, I mean, one of the first things you'll notice when the movie starts, I mean, what's incredible is how much of Bond was fully formed when this movie begins. You know what I mean? Like with this movie, we get the classic gun barrel right up top. which when you're watching on Blu-ray, particularly on a nice television or in 4K, you can tell that's not Sean Connery.
A, not Sean Connery. B, it really drove me crazy that they didn't center him in the barrel. Like,
oh, sure, because he does his little jump.
Yeah.
And every Bond will kind of put their own spin on it. Connery doesn't do it for a few films.
Really?
Which is interesting that they just were like, they couldn't be buggered to like film it at any point. But that's stunt actor Bob Simmons doing that, who is doing some incredible work in this movie and in several of the later films, doing stunt coordination as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love the gun barrel. But the weird thing about it is that blood pours down inside the barrel.
Right.
But it's such a funny, weird stylistic choice, and I love it. I enjoy that leading into, you know, this sort of spacey, goofy Art Deco credit sequence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, big sassy credits. There's no cold open. There's no song about Dr. No that plays over the, you know, you're so like with Bond movies, there's always the big theme, and this one's kind of like a weird little medley or like an entr'acte.
Yeah, that was surprising to me. As I was like, oh, I'm expecting to hear some sort of a Bond song or Bond theme, and what I get is
the theme.
Three Blind Mice.
But then you get the Bond theme, which was written by Monty Norman. It was originally meant for a musical. It was originally a song called Bad Sign, Good Sign, which was written for a musical that never got produced called A House for Mr. Biswas. And the original song was this guy singing about how he like, the lyrics were, I was born with this unlucky sneeze, and what is worse, I came in the wrong way round. It's literally about a guy being born like with bad luck under a bad sign, and it has this kind of very jaunty melody, but the melody of the song is bum ba da ba ba bum bum ba da da ba, and Monty Norman was like, I don't know, can we use this for the movie? Because the producers wanted Underneath the Mango Tree, which we hear 1,000 times, to be like the main theme of the movie. And John Barry, the composer, was like, I'll see what I can do with this. And he jazzed it up and added strings and a surf guitar. And that's how we get the immortal James Bond theme.
I've been walking around singing it for the past 3 days.
You started doing it when we got on this call. You were like, ba da ba. Yeah, and then we get some dance music, and then a sort of reggaeton version of Three Blind Mice, which leads us into our
with three blind men walking around the streets of Jamaica.
Yeah,
supposedly blind men.
My favorite thing about that is that then becomes a motif whenever those assassins show up. So there's a scene later on in the film where they like step out of the shadows, and you hear bum bum bum. I'm like, oh, foreboding Three Blind Mice. I love that so much.
I didn't look in the credits. They probably have them listed as the Three Blind Mice in the credits.
Something
somewhere.
Like that.
Yeah.
The jaded Three Blind Mice.
Yeah.
To reference Silver Linings playlist. It's interesting because I remember watching this one as a kid. And I don't know if this is interesting. It's just something that happened to me. I remember watching this as a kid. The first time I saw it, I knew a bunch of the Bond movies, and I was waiting. I wanted that song. I was waiting for a theme song.
Yeah.
You know, Dr. No, he won't let you do anything, or what, you know, I don't know.
Right.
Something like that. Like, I knew Goldfinger. I knew Live and Let Die, you know, and I was just baffled. I remember asking my dad, I was like, why is it like this? I think that's exactly what I said, and he was like, look, they didn't know what they were doing yet.
Yeah.
Like, that was, yeah. I mean, it genuinely, like, who was to know that this would be a 60+ year franchise?
Yeah, I mean, the Bond was not a cinematic icon at this point. No, it was literally just, let's see what happens with this thing.
And there had been attempts to bring Bond to television, and Bond was a well-known figure in literature, and and it's funny because Dr. No is the 4th book in the series. I mean, it's not the 6th novel in the series. Wow. It is but it was the one that had like the least objectionable content, and that the producers thought that they could like bring in on a budget. This movie only cost $1 million.
Yeah. I noticed that.
Wild. And so, but it was this thing where they were like, okay, well, this is the one that we can kind of shoot it in Jamaica on the cheap, and there's not a ton of big set pieces. It's more intrigue and dialogue. But that's why we have scenes like Bond getting admonished for carrying the wrong gun, which was a plot point carried over from the previous book.
Okay, I was wondering about that because this movie, kicks off. I mean, we kind of start our plot right away. I was a little like taken aback by how quickly they just start gunning people down and shit just starts happening.
Strangways is dead by like scene 2, and then we cut to the switchboard from the John Wick films where they're they're putting.
I love the false front, the book false front that they've got behind and all that.
Yeah, there's some really fun like DIY spycraft kind of stuff here where you're just like, oh, of course a spy would always have fake books. And I the news travels fast, and so someone is sent to find James Bond at Le Cirque. And I mean, this introduction is incredible.
This is what I think of when I think of like introduction to James Bond. Like this movie pretty much encapsulates what I would think an introduction to James Bond should be.
Yes. I mean, he looks so cool. We're introduced to Sylvia Trench, and it's interesting to me that the first Bond, James Bond, is him kind of teasing her.
I admire your courage, Miss...
Trench. Sylvia Trench. I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Because that's how she introduces herself as Trench, Sylvia Trench.
Yep.
And it supposedly, like, he did several takes of this scene and it just wasn't working. He was just, because he was just answering her. And then finally he was like, what if I light a cigarette in the middle of it? Like, I don't care that I'm answering her.
Right.
And I'm just like, that is the right instinct because it's the coolest anyone's ever looked.
Yeah. And I just wanted to notate about, Sean Connery here. I mean, yes, this is, I believe one of his first feature film.
It's early. I mean, he had done, what's that movie called? Darby O'Gill and the Little People. And then he was mostly known for playing, like, he wasn't like super manly men and stuff, to the point where, like, when he came to his audition to meet with the producers for the first time, he was wearing, like, his clothes were wrinkled, his hair wasn't made, but he impressed them with just like his firm handshake and his, his attitude, which is, I guess, is just, how business was done at the time. Because like he also wasn't even like the first, second, or third choice for the producers either. The first choice was Cary Grant, which I can't, I mean, I can imagine it for sure, but like it's so hard, when you're dealing with history, what I mean? Like this is, impossible to think of this movie with anyone else.
Watching Hitchcock's what's the one with Cary Grant?
Northwest.
Yeah, North by Northwest is basically a Bond movie.
To the point where there's a set piece in the next movie that is very North by Northwest.
Okay. Well, I have that to look forward to.
Yeah.
I was just a little taken aback by really how young he looks. Sean Connery looks in this movie.
Never looked this young.
No, and I was surprised to find out he was in his 30s when he did this too.
Yes, I know. Yeah. But also already wearing a toupee. Which like those get progressively less impressive as the series goes on. And he's it's odd because we're so used to these movies kicking off with I'm used to these movies kicking off with an action sequence, especially if you're more familiar with the Craigs. You're why isn't he parkouring anywhere?
Exactly. I'm always looking for the parkour in James Bond movies.
Why isn't he driving
now.
a crane into a train? But it's very quiet, very insistent, and it's just kind of carried by the charisma of these actors. And thank God, because as I've mentioned on Silver Linings playlist, I don't know how any card games are played. So like, I don't know how Baccarat works. I know I've read Casino Royale, which explains the rules, and I still can't follow it. But I'm just so drawn in by Bond, by his cool, calm, and collected demeanor, and by Sylvia Trench, Eunice Gayson. Her perpetually cocked eyebrows. She just looks. Everyone in the scene just looks so cool.
Yeah.
And I just want to be in that room and also not look at or speak to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, my first response to her was like, "Oh, hello," like, you know. Yeah, I mean, and of course that's a trope that's going to continue out throughout all of these movies. But yeah, I was very surprised to find her being sort of playful with him and not really being that sort of, "Oh, Mr. Bond," you know, that kind of thing. You know, we've got an introduction to a really stern female at the beginning of this. Unfortunately, she does not go through the entire movie, but you know, I was surprised.
And she's an original character for the film as well. Like, just serves to introduce Bond, and she's the reason that we get that great introduction, and we get the idea that he's great with the ladies, and but it is interesting. Like, she makes such a huge impression for such a short amount of screen time. Like, she's very assertive, very tough as nails. I think a lot of that, you know, we'll see characters like that again, not as often as I would like, but she's fantastic. And from there we're whisked away to, I mean, again, fully formed James Bond tropes. Bond comes into MI6. He flirts with Moneypenny a little bit. Then he has to, you know, talk to M, who admonishes him on some case we haven't gotten to see. You know,
that was the stuff that I was a little, you know, just coming into this first time, you know, with the Craig movies, Moneypenny was not introduced until, I believe, Inspector. Skyfall. Was it Skyfall?
Yeah, she's not named until the very end. Like, she's referred to as Eve throughout that movie until the last scene. Yeah.
So just from that notion, I was surprised that Moneypenny was introduced in the first movie here.
Yeah.
And then my next note was they're giving him shit for not having a good enough gun.
So the backstory here is in From Russia with Love, the novel. He's almost killed when he can't get to his Beretta in time. Like, it like hangs up in his holster and jams, and then he's poisoned. And so that's what M is referring to kind of in this scene. Like, in the Dr. No novel, it opens with Bond recovering from his last adventure and being told, you can't carry this gun anymore. And there's a really funny true story behind this. A guy named Jeffrey Boothroyd, a Major Jeffrey Boothroyd, sent a letter to Ian Fleming after reading his novels and said, essentially, cracking good stuff, but Bond simply would not use a Beretta. There's this incredible behind the scenes clip on the Blu-ray.
I'm not James Bond. He's a fictitious character, as so many are in Fleming's books. Excepting one, a Jeffrey Boothroyd, a Scotsman who lives in Glasgow, whose hobby is guns.
My name's Jeffrey Boothroyd. I'm not Major Boothroyd, but I do share with the Major an interest in firearms.
This guy sent a letter to Ian Fleming, said Bond wouldn't use this gun. He also wouldn't use a chamois leather holster. It would get snagged in the holster all the time. It'd be like trying to, you know, wrap your gun up in a handkerchief and then unroll it before you can fire it.
Right.
And there's this great special feature where he like does a quick draw to the camera and fires, and like it's wild. But essentially, Fleming got this letter and was like, fair play, okay. And he not only changed Bond's gun in the books because of this letter, but he then named Q, the armorer, after him.
Nice.
And so it's wild, guys. And trust me, if you send us hate mail, we're not gonna name our podcast after you. But I do think that it's kind of incredible that he like changed pop culture history, but with an actually.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
I love it. But yeah, that's why we get this like protracted scene of explaining why one gun is better than the other. It's very weird though to watch it like out of context.
Yeah.
Because it does feel like we're getting Bond's supposed to be cool and on top of everything, and all this scene kind of does is show he's fucked up in the last mission.
Uh-huh.
And but it also shows that he's not always cool with taking orders. Like, he's a little bit of a scamp.
Yep.
Because M has to get his gun back from him and tell him to stop flirting with Moneypenny.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And yeah, I mean, that was what I was a little like taken aback by watching it. I was like,
yeah,
I just think Bond is this cool special spy agent guy, and you've got M just sort of belittling him in this entire scene.
And I love Bernard Lee as M. He's just so, he was cast the day before they started filming.
Wow.
And he's just, he's like cool as a cucumber. Like there's not a doubt for a second that, one, he's in charge, and two, everyone respects him.
Yeah.
Like, you know, even when Bond's disagreeing with him, it's very much a yes, sir. All right, I'll take care of it. Thank you. Thank you for, you know, giving me a better gun, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, it's it is wild. Like, that's kind of our, you know, as the, you know, one of the tropes of the Bond movies is the the arming up montage or whatever, getting the new gadgets. And this is his gadget scene, is you need to stop using a shitty gun.
Yeah, that was what I was most surprised by in this one, was the lack of gadgets.
Yeah.
You know, he gets the radiation, what is it called?
The Geiger counter.
Yeah, he gets the Geiger counter sent over from MI6, but I was surprised to see that he doesn't have a cool transforming car. You get no ejector seat in this one. So this one is, I would say, just from a first time perspective,
very grounded.
Yeah, very much just a basic run of the mill spy movie. And
I think that there's something to that. There's a lot of like Bond figuring things out through conversation and not with his fists. He doesn't kill anyone until an hour into the movie.
Right.
You know, when he shoots Dent, which we'll get there, because that's, I think, the best scene in the movie. But
yeah. Well, there's also the scene in the when they're on is it Crab Island? Crab Key, and you know, he has to take out one of the mercenaries that's chasing him in the river.
Away before the stab.
Yeah, and then you've got Honey kind of reacting to that, and she says, you know, why'd you do that? And he said, I had to. You know, and that scene kind of plays a little like, oh, like it kind of takes you back there for a second.
Sure. There's a savagery to the deaths, and there's a reluctance to it. Like this, in stark contrast to Ian Fleming's Bond, at least in this first couple movies, Bond really doesn't seem to enjoy killing.
Yeah.
Except for that first one. That his first on-screen kill is dark, it's brutal, and
because he has like almost no emotion to it. He is sitting cross-legged in a position and is just literally like almost doesn't even flinch when he fires the gun. It's just boom.
And then when Dent is on his stomach, he shoots him again. He shoots him in the back. Like, he shoots a man that's down to make sure he stays down.
Right.
And it's upsetting. Like, it's wild.
And in context with the rest of the movie, I mean, Bond, you know, we've already said this many times, like, Bond just comes across as this cool, calm, like, I know what I'm doing, leave me alone, let me do my job. I kind of got the sense in this one that he didn't have all the answers. He didn't know what to do in certain scenarios. And,
I mean, even when he gets taken by Dr. No, he's just kind of bluffing his way into letting the villain tell him what's up. And Dr. No is more than happy to do it because he's a megalomaniac, you know? But yeah, we Bond jets to Jamaica to check out the, you know, what happened to Strangways. He's picked up at the airport by a secret, you know, a undercover villain. And they're tailed by the one and only Felix Leiter, played by Jack Lord from Hawaii Five-0, wearing the wildest sunglasses I've ever seen in my life.
I like the way they set this up, though, because you don't really know
who's to be trusted.
Yeah, I imagine this is going to be the theme throughout all these movies, is like who is on Bond's side and who's not. I honestly was kind of waiting for Felix to turn on Bond throughout this entire movie, which never happens.
Yeah. Well, because he's got that very, like, you know, how do I know I can trust you? I mean, the first time he really gets introduced to Felix is when, you know, Quarrel's got a knife on him, Felix pulls a gun on him, and it takes a minute before they're able to kind of sort everything out. But we get our first great one-liner of the movie when that assassin eats a cyanide pill hidden in a cigarette and dies, Bond drives him to the consulate.
Sergeant, make sure he doesn't get away.
and then walks inside.
And it's funny, like, it's so casual with a dead body. Like,
yes. Which is funny because we were just talking about how I think this Bond's a very honorable man. And then we're like, no, he doesn't give a shit about human life.
And it's I brought up Fistful of Dollars at the beginning of this, and there's a scene in that where they literally are just using dead soldier bodies to bait and switch someone in that movie. So it's like, you guys have no regard for these dead people.
Well, you know what's interesting? There was like Ian Fleming would draft up plans for British naval intelligence during the war, and one of his plans was like attach fake he was like attach fake plans to a corpse and leave it floating in the ocean so that when the enemy found it, we could draw them into a trap. And it was like it was something called like the name of the document was Suggestion, Not a Very Nice One, or something like that. So like this is the mind that's creating Bond, which is very much like, you know what? Like if you're after me, I immediately don't care about you anymore.
Yeah.
Like I think Bond does try to help people, but the second he can't trust them, and this will carry on through every movie up till No Time to Die. The second Bond thinks that his trust has been swayed in any way or betrayed in any way, he's done with you.
Yeah.
Whether that means you're a dead man or he's gonna leave you behind, that depends on what you do next.
Well, Bond's trying to figure out what happened and try to do his detective work here, and you've got this photographer walking around the club and taking pictures, and he sees her out of the corner of his eye, so he decides to address that and deal with that situation.
Yeah,
this is a weird scene because she sort of comes out of nowhere. Like, I understand.
That's Annabelle Chung. Yeah, the Annabelle storyline doesn't really go anywhere.
Well, that was one thing that I am sort of familiar with Bond movies, and it's because I saw it in A View to a Kill. He is not selective with his with his women. Like, he will go after anyone and everyone. And I kind of expected that, like the photographer girl here, to sort of be that other background secondary Bond girl.
There's always in many of the movies there is like a secondary love interest or just someone he cozies up to get information, which is the case with Miss Taro later. But it is interesting. Like they do set this kind of subplot in motion, but it doesn't lead to much, other than to show that he's not afraid to get his hands dirty, and that he it also drags out the three blind mice again. But it is it's an odd little side story that doesn't really add up a ton.
It's one of the things Coral, whenever he meets Coral and they kind of have a nice little budding friendship. I was also waiting for Coral to turn on him at some point in the movie, which never happens.
It doesn't help that they're at odds originally, because he doesn't know if Coral is a suspect. Coral doesn't know if he's working for if Bond is working for Dr. No. And these are the kinds of this is the kind of shit I love in espionage stories, like who can you trust? Who is on the side of the angels? Who's playing the long game? Who's playing a double game?
Right.
And there's a lot of that. This movie, while having, I think, a very straightforward plot, especially compared to several of the later Bond movies, this one is very much, a lot of the conflict comes from who knows what they're talking about when, it's either, can Dent be trusted? Harvey Dent, can he be trusted? Can Dent be trusted? Can Coral be trusted? What's Felix's deal? Is Bond even going to be allowed to make the arrest if there is an arrest?
Right.
Why do people think there's a dragon on the island?
That was pretty odd from the get-go. I was like, okay, dragons already, so this is kind of weird. But when our first introduction to Coral here, and the quarrel they have, he has Puss Fuller come in and help, and he's like, you don't want to mess with Puss Fuller, he wrestles alligators. And
I love that.
I was confused because, and this is kind of weird, but like I at first thought that these guys were the assassins in the beginning of the film that had taken out Strange Way.
They had put on like a lot of like
Yeah, and especially Puss Fuller, because like I thought he was one of the ones that gunned down the secretary in Strange Ways' office. Yeah. But upon second watch, I was like, oh, it's not. They just kind of look similar. But yeah, so I was a bit confused as to what was going on there. If these guys were actually people that he could trust or people that were going to double cross him.
Sure.
And I think that's really the biggest thing I have going into these movies is I'm always expecting there's like three things you expect coming into a Bond movie. Good theme music, someone's going to turn on Bond at some point, and a variety of Bond girls.
Well, 1 out of 3 ain't bad. You know what? Like I get it. Like it is in a lot of ways, this movie to me is very much proto Bond. I think there's a lot of stuff that works, but it's not fully formed yet. Like they're still figuring it out. I think the series really comes into its own with the second one, for better or for worse. There's some really dicey stuff in From Russia with Love, but for it's a masterpiece in my opinion. Like I'm really excited to get to that one because I feel like, you know, a lot of the kind of misgivings or like things that you're on the fence about will be fleshed out further and feel a little bit better in the second one. Right. And also like my biggest issue with this movie, it just comes down to pacing.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of that has to do with where filmmaking was at the time. And by the way, I'm drinking a Red Bull with Smirnoff, which we get to see prominently displayed in several scenes.
Yep.
Smirnoff and Red Stripe, the drinks of champions.
I love when the people are giving him the drinks in Dr. No's lair, and they're like they describe the drink to him, and he's like vodka. Like he has to confirm.
Yeah. Which, by the way, they don't quite get the order correct in this movie. One of the guys goes, "Mixed like you said, sir, and not stirred."
Yep.
But like, there's so many scenes in this movie that feel like we're watching like an ad for a timeshare, like, or you know, like there's a lot of travelogue-y kind of stuff, a lot of like shot, and which, by the way, this movie looks gorgeous.
Yes.
Like the fact that the cinematography is this good on a $1 million budget in 1962 is insane. This movie is absolutely beautiful, and a lot of that is helped by the fact that they're shooting in natural lighting and in real places. Like it's something you forget about when most of the blockbusters we get now are shot on green screens, where it's just like this is absolutely beautiful and cannot be faked. But
now there are some rear projection things that you will notice.
There's a couple of rear projection bits and a couple of matte painting. Sorry, there's a couple of matte paintings that like really show up on the Blu-ray.
Yeah.
But by and large, I think this movie looks great, and we do get a lot of establishing shots and a lot of scenes of Bond checking into a hotel, looking for his mail, renting a car.
Now, I like when he's entering his hotel room, he's looking around the room, he's prepping the room. I love the little added stuff of him putting the hair on the door and and dusting the suitcase, so he'll know if anybody's been in there. So that's the stuff I don't mind seeing. But yeah, when he's checking into the hotel, and I don't really need to see him flirting with the girl at the front counter and all of the stuff that goes into all of that. Like, the pacing here is a bit off.
Receptionists love James Bond.
Yeah.
That might as well be a trope along with the gadgets, is just him like flirting with the lady at the desk.
Yep.
Which, guys, don't do that. They're paid to be there, not to deal with you flirting with them. But still, it's very fun to watch Bond do it.
But I love how all of the conversations he has with the ladies in this always ends up being something, sexual innuendo. I wrote down a few things with who is the lady,
but it's still at least a little bit.
It's tame here.
It's tame here. It's not like later on, Pierce Brosnan might as well be like, so what if I put it on the counter? Like, it's ridiculous.
Well, I'm jumping ahead a bit, but at the end of this, whenever they get away from Dr. No's hideout, he's, they're in the boat and he says, well, we can swim and I was like, we can swim or fuck, huh? That's how this is going to be.
That's the plan. All right.
And yes, but I mean, you know, even when he's with Moneypenny and the young lady at the beginning of the movie, like all of these just little innuendos, and you know, right here I'm digging it. We'll see where it goes throughout the series, but
it gets rough. There's some times where it gets rough. Like weirdly enough, this is Bond at his most restrained until maybe the Timothy Dalton era. You know, we get like Bond gets directions to Miss Taro's villa or her little home, and we get to watch him drive there in real time.
This is where I really got an Austin Powers vibe.
Oh, for sure, with the rear projection.
The rear projection, the car chase, the car going off the cliff, the one-liner afterwards.
That sort of thing could get a man fired.
We watch it go all the way down the cliff, and then it explodes, and the construction worker says, like, what happened? And he goes,
I think they were on their way to a funeral.
Which is like not even clever. But the construction worker like has this look on his face like, damn, like that sucks. Which, by the way, almost every ancillary character in this movie is dubbed, and that is something you will find in a lot of these because they're either using local talent or they just couldn't get the record, like they couldn't get the sound on the day, you know, because they're filming outside or what have you. And so that's why you get a lot of like these weird kind of jarring scenes where like you know this Jamaican guy has a very clearly like deep bellowing British man's voice, like it's so, you know, and it kind of comes to a head in You Only Live Twice, where multiple characters seem to have the same voice. Like, it's very odd.
Well, that's something that happens within the spaghetti westerns too, because again, like Fistful of Dollars, like that's one reason that Jason has trouble watching movies like that is because all of the dialogue in those is dubbed.
I think a lot of that's charming. I actually, for some reason, it doesn't bother me with those.
Well, me being the old fart that I am, I watch pretty much everything with subtitles on now.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, as far as dialogue, I mean, in most movies now, I have so much trouble understanding what people are saying half the time because either the mix is bad or there's just a lot of people talking, and I've missed like important plot points in movies because I just don't know what the hell they're saying. Right. So that's led to me actually turning on subtitles. My wife hates it. She hates reading movies.
I'm very picky. It depends on what kind of movie I'm watching. Sometimes if I'm watching something with really thick accent, like I had to watch Broadchurch with subtitles the whole time because I'm like, I can't, half of these Welsh accents I can't follow. And even David Tennant's accent, like I was having trouble with. And with most Christopher Nolan movies now, because the man refuses to mix his movies properly.
Right. It's something about this podcast, man. We tend to rag on Nolan here. We love his movies, but for some reason we continue to rag on Nolan.
I love Christopher Nolan, but like, damn, dude, like meet the audience halfway in some ways.
And that was, Jenny and I just did our we watched Dune when it came out, and we watched it, in a dark room. We weren't able to go to the theater to see it, but dark room, nice mood setting, everything, and like because I couldn't hear what they were saying half the time or make out what the dialogue was, I was lost.
Yeah,
and
I still haven't seen it.
And well, I've watched half of it now with subtitles on, and I'm following it much better.
Oh, good. Oh, you know what? We skipped over the spider, the attempted murder by spider. Yes. What did you think of that?
It was comical for me, just simply because, it's a big ass spider. I mean, he could have knocked that thing off of him about 7 times. But my favorite part of that scene is the musical cues. I laughed out loud. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, so the way Connery is deathly afraid of spiders, and the way that they got that shot was they put a glass sheet over him, and then laid him on a bed that was at an angle, like that he was kind of like strapped into, so that they could have the spider crawl its way up and look like it was on him. And then they brought in a stunt man to have like the close-up shots of it, like
so all the close-up stuff is not Sean Connery.
Not Connery.
Wow.
No.
Okay,
Because
I did not know that.
At the time they couldn't defang it or something. They were just like, we can't, like, so yeah, there's a lot of weird little things like that. Like apparently there was supposed to be a scene where there's like they get attacked by a bunch of crabs, but the crabs were shipped in from overseas and frozen so that they barely moved when it was like time to unleash them on honey.
It reminds me of the scene where the crab is walking in front of Coral after the Coast Guard for crab key or whatever they are starts firing on them. I was like, what is this random crab just walking across the scene?
Mad little crab. But yeah, so I love the confrontation with Miss Taro because there's so much scary tension in this scene. I think this scene's done really well. When he walks in with the towel, and you think like, God, he's about to torture this person. Like that's what's about. And then he just kind of like it's almost like he either he's doing it to scare her or to scare the audience. Either way, it's working.
Yeah.
And he waits until after she has slept with him to reveal, I'm having you arrested, which is
yeah. Well, I mean, he disguises it pretty well because he makes the call and he says, I just need a car.
I need a car.
And then they show up and
what's your address?
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, his story behind, where's your car? Oh, it didn't start. And she goes, that explains it. Like all of that's real smart. I like that. But you know, the main thing I'm thinking in this scene is, okay, well, you failed to have me killed, so now you have to fuck me.
Yeah, it's I will say it's not his diciest moment, but it's not a good look. It's not a good look for James Bond.
And that's what I mean by him being dialed into like knowing what he needs to do to get things out of people. But like in like this scene, and like you said,
it is spycraft. I mean, they are literally using each other. And this was based on some real life shit that Ian Fleming was privy to. So like there was a lot of weird stuff during the war with people quite literally sleeping with the enemy to get information. So it's a weird and problematic moment when James Bond knows the truth and still goes along with it. It's an odd scene.
And I seem to remember from A View to a Kill that he sleeps with Grace Jones' character at one point in that, which she is a villain, or you know, she is the sidekick to Christopher Walken's villain in that one.
And there's an incredible behind the scenes story about that scene that we'll get to in like a year and a half.
So that's where I wrote a note here. I was like, is this where, you know, we get the trope within the Bond series of he's gonna bed any of the women that he wants to, whether they're good or bad.
Yeah, no, Bond likes a villainess, you know, that is definitely something that will come back. It's not always done in such a transactionary cold manner, but it definitely is one of the elements of these earlier movies that feels a little ickier now for sure. But luckily it is followed by my favorite scene in the movie, which is when he interrogates Dent about his involvement with Dr. No, and my favorite line in the film.
Who are you working for, Professor?
Well, you might as well know, as you won't live to use the information.
I'm working for Mr. Smith & Wesson. And you've had your 6.
Yeah, and he kills him.
It's cold, man. It's cold as hell.
It's Bond's first kill on screen, it's memorable. It's controversial among film goers and critics at the time, and it's still one that people are kind of like back and forth on if this is like what you want out of the character. But I think
I didn't know there was so much controversy surrounding Ian Fleming and the Bond books and all of that. This is all information that I'm getting as we're doing this show.
He was an interesting fellow with some indefensible opinions on people of color and women, and you can justify, or not justify, but you can try to write things off as ignorance of the times all you want, but there are things that, like, even back then people were like, come on, Ian.
Yeah. And one thing I found was, the novel was criticized in Britain, and it says Paul Johnson of the New Statesman dismissed the book as one of sex, snobbery, and sadism.
Yeah, Bond was seen as a sadistic human being. I mean, there were when Casino Royale came out, there were people who wrote it off as, nothing more than a disgusting power fantasy full of violence. I mean, and to be fair, that is a book where a guy, gets his balls beaten with a carpet beater for about 15 pages. But yeah, I can also see it being very difficult for sensibilities of the time to handle. And even now, like, I've read these books, and there's things where I wish you had written that line of dialogue in any other way, or specifically, and especially You Only Live Twice and Live and Let Die. The books have some passages that I can't defend in any way. I'm glad I read them as a time capsule, but it's not something that I'm particularly enthused by.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard thing for us to face in this day and age, especially in the culture that we are in now. When I was young, the LGBTQ community was not accepted hardly at all. Sure. And we've come a long way. We still have a long ways to go.
Yeah.
But where we are now compared to where, especially with these movies, I mean, this movie came out 20 years before I was born. So just seeing, having to realize that entertainment used to be within a certain frame of thinking. And
it's like, I was reading this interview with the screenwriters of the Bill and Ted movies, and Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter, and they were talking about how, if they actually had a time machine, the one thing they'd fix is the homophobic slur in the original Bill and Ted, because it's something that they're just like, this is the antithesis of what these loving, sweetheart characters is like. It's such a, and it, that being said, I don't know that Ian Fleming would do anything differently now. But as I mentioned in our little introductory episode, one of the joys of the Bond series for me is that I feel like there are major elements in storytelling that have evolved with the times. There are certain things that will always be problematic about James Bond as a sort of wish fulfillment character, but in terms of his humanity and the way that he treats the little guy, and the way that the treatment of women in these films evolves over time, the treatment of the it will be one of the things that I'm most looking forward to in this series, is seeing that growth as we go through the movies, because like there are some very difficult conversations to have, and certain things that that are best left. There are things that are best left as, well, they didn't know any better, and there are other things that we should point out and say they should have known better. And I know we'll come across some, especially in these early goings.
Yeah, I mean, that was really what I was the most surprised by watching this one, is I felt this one was tame in a lot of those regards. Is there problems with some of the things here, some of the situations? Sure. The Mrs. Taro scene is problematic. Some of the way some of the people are treated in this is
some of that I do think comes from a place of the spy game is ugly. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't think that it's necessarily, in this film at least, as problematic or outright offensive as it can be, and as it actually is in the novel. I mean, the novel version of Dr. No is more or less Fu Manchu. Like, he is a yellow scare type character, and the film softens that a bit. It's not great that Dr. No is still played by a white guy. But there are changes made to the character's background to try to make that work a little bit better. But it's still not. It's not the greatest example of colorblind casting I've ever seen.
Well, in that reveal that you hear about Dr. No's background, I just kept getting flashes of a Ren Ishii from Kill Bill. The Yakuza guys there, like, we don't want her here. She's not part of this, and
the price you pay for bringing up either my Chinese or American heritage as a negative is I collect your fucking head.
That was the kind of the feel that I was getting when we got the introduction to Dr. No here.
Sure.
The other thing that I was a bit surprised by in this movie, I thought this was going to come a little later in the Bond series, was our introduction to Honey Rider, with her coming out on the beach and
the shot of Ursula Andress. I mean, genuinely one of the most iconic shots in cinema.
Yep.
Is the introduction of Honey Rider, who is, in theory, a great character.
I was having a little bit of trouble as to why she was even there.
Yeah, she's a very, I think she's a compelling character in the novel. The movie, really the only thing you really get, the only things you get that really kind of color her character are the her backstory of killing a man who assaulted her, and which I love that little exchange. It also, you get a little bit of a disconnect from her because Ursula Andress is also dubbed. So you do get that kind of gives you a little bit of distance between her and her emotionality, but it's interesting. It does feel like she's introduced so that Bond has a lady companion for the final act, and even then she kind of disappears into the background for a little bit.
Right.
But for all intents and purposes, she is the prototypical Bond girl. Like she's the bombshell who literally comes out of the waves holding shells.
That's what got me too, was just the whole idea of her. She's there collecting shells.
I can sell these for $50 in Miami.
$50. Yeah. It's like, okay, you do not realize what kind of shit you've just walked into taking shells off this island.
She also so in the book, she was collecting the shells to sell to buy her freedom after killing the guy who assaulted her.
See, that makes more sense,
which I love. I think that's a really cool story, or an interesting motivation for her that's not here. I don't love stories that use assault as a motivation for a character. But I do think that you lose a lot of her agency in the film version. There's a lot of her just kind of, it for a little while, it's her and Quarrel just kind of relying on Bond to do everything, which feels very reductive for their characters, especially Quarrel, who up until this point has been a guy who will pull a knife on a motherfucker, and take him out to sea and dump them.
and that was really why I was a bit surprised. Yeah, like when we finally meet this infamous dragon that everyone's talking about, which is a giant tank.
With a flamethrower.
That flamethrower takes Quarrel, fries his ass.
On screen. That is wild. I always forget, and it's a good fire stunt too.
Yeah.
Or at least a very good dummy. Like, I don't know how they do it, but it's really, it's jarring, and it's still like upsetting even today, I think.
Well, just the stunt itself is jarring, but like the fact that, again, like I was expecting Quarrel to at some point turn on Bond, but all the way up until the point where he is set on fire, he has been nothing but a good sidekick for him, and he's been a
great sidekick. He's been very capable, and then the second they get on the island, like, Bond has to tell him to hide from someone shooting at him. It's very jarring.
Might have something to do with all the rum he was drinking, because he was chug-a-lugging on that rum.
Well, there's no fresh water there. They're drinking seawater, and but it through a reed. That the introduction of Honey also gives us a very interesting singular moment in the Bond franchise, which is it's the only time James Bond sings on screen.
Yeah,
he sings underneath the mango tree.
Yeah, well, of course, it's that song that we've heard throughout the entire movie.
In this world, I think might be the only song that exists because it's sung at the club. Bond puts it on the record player at one point, and then she comes out of the ocean singing it, and he sings it back to her. There's this really funny anecdote where Ursula Andress says that she and Connery were fighting over the turntable that they had on set because they were both trying to learn their lines of the song. I'm like, they didn't sing the whole song. Like,
right.
it's A1. Yeah. But there is something kind of jarring to see Sean Connery go, underneath the mango tree.
Yeah. But I mean, he's got a nice voice.
He's got a sweet little voice, and it doesn't put her at ease. Like, guys, again, I think this might be a recurring thing through our show is me telling people not to do the things James Bond does. If you see a lady minding her own business, singing a song, don't go up and finish the song for her.
Yeah,
like
let her collect her shells and be about her way.
Leave her alone. Let her sell her shells. And avoid the dragon, not get tied up in a volcano lair.
The volcano lair. Again, another Austin Powers thing that I noticed here.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh, and the hazmat suits and like the Nehru collars that all the villains wear. They escape breathing through the reeds. We get that there's this great little moment where Bond comes up out of the water, takes a deep breath, and just kind of smiles that it worked. Like he kind of looks back and forth, like, you fucking believe that?
I just kept thinking about that scene at the end of the Disney's Robin Hood, where they think Robin Hood's dead and he swims away and he's breathing through the reed.
Yes. Which, do you think that would work?
I think as a kid, I tried to do that, but of course, as a kid, you're not thinking about, how this actually works.
Sure. I got to whittle the middle of it.
Yeah.
Whittle the middle, but she got much back.
But no, his whittling only goes for the top and the bottom. Yeah. So like the whole middle of this reed of bamboo is just like, no, you're not breathing through that, bro.
No, and let alone getting 3 of them done for them. Yeah. But I do love that little moment where he kills the guy. She's kind of shocked by it, and then she wants to talk to him about her past.
Then one night he came up to my room. Well, I scratched his face, and then... But he was stronger than I was.
And what happened after that?
I put a black widow spider underneath his mosquito net. A female, and they're the worst. It took him a whole week to die.
Yeah. And she goes, did I do wrong? And he can't tell her no. He can't tell her she did. Like, I love that. I think that's a great exchange. That's much more mature than the other conversations he's had with women throughout the movie.
Yeah.
And it's just there's a mutual respect there. And I think that is the closest we get to Honey feeling like a character.
The thing about her character here is again, we were introduced to her almost 3/4 of the way through the movie.
Sure.
And, just happens that she has this weird backstory.
She gets more screen time than Dr. No.
She does.
Yeah.
Just case in point, she's gonna be the girl that Bond's focused on throughout the rest of this movie, and she has this interesting backstory. Like, what are the chances of you finding this particular person? Seems a little out of place, but I mean, we are in a fictional world here. But I do like the chemistry her and Connery have on screen.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't feel like she's given a ton to do, especially once we get into Dr. No's lair, because she does pretty much just disappear.
She gets drugged. Yeah, she gets drugged. Then she gets to have some grapes, and then she gets like locked up somewhere for the next like 20 minutes of the movie.
But I gotta say, when they are captured, are they captured by a person running a spa? Because they get great service, taken to their room, given food and drink. Now, here's the thing.
Yeah.
If you were looking for someone who is up to evil and doing, or up to no good and doing evil in the world, would you accept the coffee from them and drink
Absolutely
it right away?
No, I love that, like, Ken Adam, the production designer, like had this concept of Dr. No, where he's just like essentially, and this is not a direct quote, but he's essentially like, he's evil, but he can still be bougie. You know what I mean? Like this guy's got good taste. So yeah, they're taken through decontamination. They have to trim Bond's fingernails so that they can lower the radiation levels in his body, which I love. And they get like basically sent through a car wash, and they're taken to these like opulent rooms where I'm just like, fuck, I want to get kidnapped by Dr. No. Like that looks like a great vacation.
Yeah, and I gotta say, Dr. No's lair is amazing.
The design is incredible.
I love beautiful. The fireplace. That fireplace is ginormous.
Yeah.
And that tree that's growing up through between the two walls.
Yes.
I love that nice. Shit, dude. It looks
There's a lot
so
of really
good.
nice touches here. There's also the insane magnified fish tank or like because they had. So they couldn't afford to literally put like giant fish in an aquarium or whatever. So they bought stock footage of fish, but the stock footage that they could afford were like goldfish sized. So they were like, okay.
I love that they go through the trouble of explaining why the fish are so big.
They had to put it through. They had to like reverse engineer that so they could get it to work. And so Dr. No is just like, it's of my own design. And my favorite, I love his introduction is him saying,
$1 million, Mr. Bond.
Which might as well be the director being like, oh, you wanted to know how much my movie costs?
Yeah.
A unique feat of engineering, if I may say so. I designed it myself. The glass is convex, 10 inches thick, which accounts for the magnifying effect.
Minnows pretending they're whales, just like you on this island, Dr. No.
But, just the glass is 10 feet thick, and therefore that is the reason why the magnification, like just the fact that he goes through that whole tangent of explaining had me cracking up, dude.
Now, did that explanation make you laugh? Or Dr. No has a few different expository lines in the scene where they go to dinner together. Bond, he says he won't shake hands because of a misfortune. That's the only explanation we get for his metal hands.
Yeah, I was like, what? Okay, they're gonna explain. No, they go through the trouble of explaining to me this giant fish tank, but no, they're not gonna explain why he's got robotic hands.
In the novel, he had pincers, like they were like hooks, hook hands, basically. And in this one, he's just got these like robot hands.
Yeah.
And then he reveals to Bond that he works for Spectre.
I'm a member of Spectre.
Spectre?
Spectre. Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, Extortion. The 4 great cornerstones of power, headed by the greatest brains in the world.
Correction. Criminal brains.
It's a little loaded. I mean, you're pushing the limits there a little bit, I think. But
you think like put it because when the first 2 letters of the acronym are part of one word.
Yeah.
It is, and it's so funny because in the books, like the villains were Smersh, which is like the basically Russian counterintelligence. It stands for Spionum, which translated as death to spies. Which was was real, like it was a special like directorate in the USSR, like, and so they kind of wanted. There's a lot of things done in this movie to sort of try to move away from real world politics and counterintelligence agencies,
right?
So that's why they created Spectre, to essentially say like, oh no, we're not commenting on any real persons living or dead, like,
right,
so
right.
It's an interesting move because it also kind of gives it a very comic booky pulp feel to have this absurd name.
And that was another thing I was surprised by, that I was seeing for the first time in this movie. Like because
has never heard of Spectre.
Right. And they introduced Spectre so late in the Bond films. And I would imagine, since the Craig movies are not direct, remakes of older movies. It's a reboot of the franchise, but they're still paying homage to those stories. So I was kind of under the impression that, you know, maybe Spectre is something that comes along later, but no, like they throw that into the mix right here.
And in a few movies, we will get into the tricky legal history of Spectre, which is why they vanished for years until the Craig movies. And which will eventually lead us to a very odd off-brand Connery Bond movie. There's a whole insane story about Spectre from a real life standpoint. But as we know it here, this is just some group that Dr. No works for that doesn't really have anything to do with the plot, other than he explains that he's a genius. He's a nuclear genius. No one wants to work with him. The Chinese won't work with him. He's on the run from the Chinese Tong that he betrayed
because he stole money to finance his stuff from them or something like that. Like the plot here is a bit convoluted, and I was having a little trouble understanding even after watching it 3 times. I was like,
big old info dump.
Yeah, like I was like, what exactly is his plan here? Like it's not
his plan is
super
to
clear.
Embarrass them. Like he literally. He might as well be Tim Robinson, and I think you should leave, where he just goes to NASA and says, I'm going to embarrass you at this party. Like his plan is, you guys, like America won't let me build their rockets. Well, I'm going to make their rockets look like shit by shooting a radio beam at them.
Yeah.
To basically interfere with their launches. And it's, you know, I love phrases like radio beam in my motion pictures. Like there's just something very old timey science fiction about it that I love.
Yeah.
And you know, the next several sequences is basically like we get Bond escaping from his cell by smacking it with a shoe because it's like grounded or something. It's interesting to see a movie from this time period, you know, spending time in ventilation ducts. Like, I feel like that's probably something new.
We're still doing, well, I mean, we're doing that now. I think maybe back then, I don't know how common it would have been, but that's a trope. Yeah. I mean, that is a trope we use now to the fullest extent. And it's ridiculous how much we use it now.
How often. But and we follow him for a while, and then we get, I think the scene where the movie really grinds to a halt, and I mean, even counting all the stuff with the checking into a hotel and shit, I think the scene where the movie dies for like 10 minutes is just watching dudes pulling levers.
Yeah.
With no concept of what each thing does. It's just Dr. No saying, now you turn a lever. Okay, it's your turn. Tell me what your readings are. Okay, now you flip that switch. Don't go into danger. You know?
And then how, you know, when Bond decides he's going to sabotage all of it, is like, how does Bond know what to do to sabotage this? Like, it's so convoluted, man.
Well, it helps because there is a sign above the lever that says danger point. And so he fucking does it, and another guy goes, hang on a second. So Bond kills him.
Yeah.
You know? And I think Dr. No's death is pretty hardcore, where he gets boiled alive and he can't grab onto the scaffolding because of his hands.
Well, on my second watch, I was like, I kind of took a little issue with that, because we have this whole dinner scene of him with Bond, like, people who cross me, and he crushes that whatever the gold
little chalice
thing he's got on the table, and it's like, okay, so those robot hands he's got have got some grip to him, but he couldn't, you know, enforce that grip to hold on to the ladder to pull himself out of this boiling water. I was like, this is a little silly, but I mean, I'll take it.
You know what? It brings us back to our Batman 89 conversation. Did Batman mean to hold on to Jack Napier, or was he just ready to let go? Did Dr. No just say, you know what? Fuck it. I'm already too hot.
He sabotaged my life work. I'm just going to sit here and boil like an egg.
There's also there's another bit of interesting set design in Dr. No's lair, is that they made a reproduction of a stolen Goya painting, which that's the one that Bond kind of does a double take at. Like British audiences knew that this was like missing,
right?
And so like it was it got a huge laugh when it first came out. And I just love that like Dr. No is just this G who like puts stolen artwork on display and has this big old fish tank mirror. And he fucking burns to death. Like it's wild. And then we get Bond kind of running around screaming at different people, tell me where the girl is.
Yeah, it's
and
like
extras just kind of trying to sidle past him. Like there's one lady who's like trying to get past Bond while he's like interrogating someone, and she just kind of goes like,
yeah,
she just doesn't look.
Only two people saw these guys come into this lair and put them in. But he's asking everyone along the way, "Where's the girl I came in with? I don't even know who the fuck you are, man."
That one lady goes, "Room 12." And goes, show me, and she has to like take him. She's like, ugh. Like she looks she's not happy to have to like go out of her way. I think one thing that we do miss from this finale that is in the book is Bond fights a giant squid. And Dr. No doesn't die in the atomic pile. He's killed with his lair is hidden in like a guano mine, and he's drowned in guano. Like that's how he dies. Wow. Like he has like just tons of shit just dropped onto him, and that's how he died. It's like a very humiliating death. But the producers were like, audiences are not going to be able to tell that isn't a joke. Like we have to burn him.
There's some cuts in this last little section of the movie that I noticed. One of my favorites is with Honey. When they're getting ready to go to dinner with Dr. No, she's getting dressed and she's topless, and it cuts away from her to Bond for a second. Then as soon as it cuts back, she's got her shirt on.
It's the camera. The camera follows him where he's just like, "Can I? Do I put it on like this? You know, like it does. It does. They're like, give us your shirt, and he goes, okay, I'll come over here.
Yeah.
They do some really clever things to hot, which also feels very much like an Austin Powers gag.
Yeah.
In a way. Yeah.
And even the outfit she's got on her, the variety of outfits they have in the closet for her looks like anything they would have put on an Austin Powers girl.
It is interesting that they're like, we should give them a week's worth of clothes to choose from.
Yeah. And I love the little outfit they put on Bond. I was like, shit, I'd wear that.
It's a great outfit. I also love his remark of when she says, "How can you eat at a time like this?" And he goes, "Well, I'm hungry." Like, and that is the most Ian Fleming Bond moment. And there's so many scenes in the Fleming books where Bond just describes what he's eating. Like he's just like, so I pulled into the hotel, I ordered a carafe of coffee, scrambled eggs, bacon bits, and brown bread.
Oh, he does. He takes it even a step further. She asks him why he's eating at a time like this, and he goes, "Well, I'm hungry, and I don't know when I'm gonna ever eat again." So.
Yeah, she says, "What should we do?" And he says, "Have some breakfast." Like the way he says breakfast is my favorite thing in the world.
But I noticed that there is a blatant stunt double in the tunnel when he's climbing down out of his room.
Sure. There's also when he jumps off of the pier into the escape boat. It's definitely not Sean Connery.
And of course, there's a lot of the driving scenes where you can absolutely tell it's not Sean Connery.
Oh yeah, you'll get used to that for sure.
There is one scene in particular that I found. I mean, this is probably just the way they had to edit back then.
Yeah.
But there's a scene where he's holding a book or handing a book to someone or something, and there is a cut in the film. It just, because I do a lot of editing now, I kind of see stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I had to rewind it a couple of times. I was like, am I just seeing things, or did this happen? And I'm pretty sure there's a blatant cut in a scene that I was like, oh, that doesn't look very good. But those are that's really the gist of what I noticed here is like, there's some fun cutting of the camera, blatant, obvious that they never intended on this to be seen in high definition. So therefore we're seeing a lot of things we weren't supposed to see.
Sure.
I think there's even a spot where Bond is fighting someone in Dr. No's lair at the end where you can see like wire attached to him, like something to prevent him from falling or something. I don't know.
Okay.
But, you know, just little things like that. But
yeah.
I can forgive all of that stuff just because that was the time. I mean, they had to make movies the way they had to make movies back then. So
Right.
No one could have ever, you know, they could have never known back then that we'd be watching movies where we could actually count the follicles of hair on people's 5 o'clock shadow on TV. So
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, this movie ends pretty abruptly. I mean, just, you know, we took out Dr. No. That's that.
Bond's in a little dinghy. He runs out of fuel, and the cavalry quite literally arrives. With Felix Leiter showing up to tow him home, and Bond gets a little smooch in, and the movie ends.
And you know, I thought it was pretty smart the way they set that up too, because when he and Quarrel initially go out there with Felix, they switch boats. They say they can't use the motorized boat to get to Crab Key, and yeah, I mean, I by that time when they're out in the water, I had forgotten that Felix was supposed to meet back up with them and get them. So
it's a fun reveal, and it feels like a very moment. Like it's a very crowd pleasing moment, especially because Jack Lord looks so fucking cool when he's like standing on the boat with his legs like spread out, with just like with the megaphone, like he just looks cool. I want to see that death metal band, but with his same like outfit, like where he's just.
Well, I mean, that's pretty much the end of this one.
What's your final thoughts on Dr. No?
This was enjoyable. It was.
Yeah.
I had some pacing problems. Usually, like I said, like I kind of touched on in the beginning, older movies with the pacing and usually the dialogue. Dialogue in older films really kind of tends to drag movies down for me.
Okay.
But this one was pretty good. I could hang with this one. I had just watched The Killing, Stanley Kubrick's The Killing not too long ago. And that was a movie that sort of changed my whole perspective on older films because usually where I have problems with dialogue and dialogue being too slow or them over explaining things or just the being very monotone. You know, in Kubrick's movie, in The Killing, the dialogue in that movie is snappy and it's very like modernized in a way.
And the performances are honest and grounded. I think what you run into with a lot of older films is that there's still a lot of presentational acting as well. Like a lot of stage actors doing film work, you know, or people giving performances for a stage on film. And I think The Killing is a great example of this. Like there are moments, there are films from that time period where there are people pushing outside the boundaries of that and trying to find some realism there. And I think that there are a few performances in Dr. No that kind of fit that template as well, where they're still doing, you know, goofy, crowd pleasing popcorn, you know, action, but there are moments that I think that interrogation scene is a great example of just like a very real performance, which I think is why that scene stands out so much, because it feels like the stakes are real and the death is real and the danger is there.
The only thing I took a little issue with in that scene is the shot of that scene is very wide. So you're getting a good view of the room as this conversation, this interrogation is happening.
Sure.
And it's pretty obvious that he's sliding the comforter over to get his gun. But, and the main reason I took issue with that was like, Bond could see that. Like I can see that. There's no way Bond doesn't see that. But it's turned around in the fact that Bond is watching every movie he's making, even though he kind of, you know, he's turning around. He's like, he is so precise and dialed into him that he lets him think that he's about to get that gun, but no, he doesn't. So whereas I was about to have a very negative view of that scene, that turned it around when he just fires on him. You know, and he says, Smith & Wesson, you've used your 6. Like that was 6. Yeah. It's cold, and I really like that scene a lot now.
Yeah, and it feels very of the books, and it feels very it feels modern. It feels like a modern scene. Like I wouldn't think twice if that exact scene was in one of the Craig movies.
Yeah, I mean that seems like a line Daniel Craig would deliver with
100%.
Yeah, like. So, but overall, I mean, I enjoyed watching this. I mean, if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't have watched it multiple times, just to make sure I got everything I needed on it. So, I'm excited to keep going from this point. So, like I said, 60s movies are going to be difficult for especially, younger people or people who haven't watched a lot of older movies, but I'm part of that crowd too. And I'm in my 40s. So, I would say give Dr. No a shot. If you've never watched Dr. No, it's worth watching to kind of get to dip your toe into the Bond pool.
I definitely agree. Like, I think it's a formative film. It's it's worth watching just to see how quickly it establishes the formula that would work. I mean, of course, after this movie came out, of course, Eon Productions is like, oh God, we have a hit. Like, we have to do more of these and as close to this as possible. And so I think that for better or worse, it establishes a template that is both improved upon and also broken apart in interesting ways in future films. So I'm really looking forward to the next one.
That's what's so interesting here for me is just how, like you said, this is pretty much a cut and dry plot. Not a whole lot of crazy stuff going on here, where I'm sure some of these movies will get super convoluted.
Yeah, and but it's a good foundation for sure.
Yeah. And it does. It lays the groundwork for where we can see where they're going to bring in all these cool little gadgets. We're going to get these cars that are going to come up, and I can definitely see where something like this could end up having a lot of ups and downs, because there's a lot of room here to improve or degrade
or take the wrong messages, the wrong lessons. Yeah, of course. And we'll see that within the next 4 movies. I am and they started knocking these out quick. So I'm very excited to go on this journey with you, Josh. I feel like this was a test. This was a real test, and so I'm very happy to see that you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Because next month we are watching From Russia with Love.
From Russia with Love.
And if you had to guess, what's that movie about?
It's I'm gonna say, I think Spectre is going to be unhappy that James Bond has foiled one of their plans.
Okay.
And I think they're going to hire a Russian operative to get freaky with him while they reestablish their goals and target MI6. That would be my guess at this point.
I am not going to say anything. I am so excited. I think you're falling into the spell of these movies, man. I'm very, very excited to watch that with you next time.
And again, if you haven't listened to our introductory episode, I am purposefully not researching the movies before I watch them. I don't know anything, no plots, no nothing. What you're getting from me right now is legit what I think is going to happen in this next movie.
Yeah, man.
So we'll see what happens from here. But anything else we want to talk about in Dr. No? Any particular scenes or phrases or anything of that nature that we missed as we were talking about this one?
Man, I feel pretty good. I know that next time we'll have a legitimate theme song, so we'll be able to discuss that in depth and maybe start to form a few extra segments of our own. But for right now, I feel like we're laying a good foundation. Just like this is the Dr. No of podcasts episodes.
All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Like Nathan said, next month we will be back with From Russia with Love. And until then, it's been a nice talking to you, Mr. Nathan.
You as well, Josh. Stay shaken.